I am so excited to have Jenna Hagerich here. She is a senior brand manager at the Campbell's company. Before that, she worked her way up to VP of Business to Business Marketing at Aramark, another giant food company, using her myriad of talents, which we are going to get into here. So, welcome, Jenna. Thank you for being
Of course,
on.
thank you for having me.
Let's start where I always start. Just go ahead and share your college major and your first job out of school.
Sure. So I was actually a marketing major. I know it's rare that people end up doing what they actually majored in, but I had majored in marketing, minor in communications. I actually started working in the different food locations on campus during college. So that was really my first exposure to food service and just fell in love with it for a variety of reasons. And so I worked full time for that company, Aramark, doing marketing for a year on that campus. And then I had the opportunity to go back and get my MBA full time. So I did my MBA in one calendar year. And when I graduated, I stepped into a full time marketing role with some increased responsibility. So that was my first formal role out of college was a marketing manager.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you didn't necessarily have, I mean, I guess that first year was more of like an entry level role. And then after your MBA, you went right into that. I guess in either one of those scenarios, what do you think was the biggest surprise about entering the workforce after college?
My more inspirational answer would be that it surprised me how much I knew just as much as other people. So, I think especially growing up or even in school, I always looked up to my teachers or different adults in my life, and they seemed so much smarter than me and they always had the right answers. And I think I had some of that like insecurity entering the workforce. Like, these people have so much more experience than me. They've been doing this so much longer. Who am I to come in? And I think just it really surprised me that I had as much to offer as I did. And I think stepping into that confidence was really important. And I think more like tactically, biggest surprise was how much different the work world was versus school. So in school, like
Mm.
you're not just going to class, you're trying to balance like potentially a job, potentially other personal things, as well as studying and taking exams. And then not that the working world is easier by any means, but like your hours are just full of different things. You have to sort of manage projects on your own as opposed to having like classes that are very structured. So I think that's something that like I've seen some younger folks kind of struggle with, and just like giving yourself space and flexibility to sort of like lean into a different environment, I think can be really important.
Yeah, it's almost like so much autonomy, you don't know what to do with yourself. And I think that's what I talk about that a lot. Like, it looks like this vast, wide open plane of opportunities and paths that you can take outside of college, and it's a little bit overwhelming. So, when you find yourself in a job and they're not telling you minute by minute what you should be
Yeah.
doing, that can be difficult to be like, okay, how do I do this job? How do I make an impact with this job? So, how do you think that, and we're skipping ahead a little bit, but how do you think that somebody in their first maybe 90 days or first year in their new role, they can really make an impact at work?
Yeah, I think something that I would think about is how does the team measure success, and like how can you align yourself to that, right? So it's about like how can you align yourself to the work that's being measured and being, you know, given visibility within the organization. I would say that's probably like the biggest piece of advice. I think a great question to ask in a job interview is how do you measure success of someone in this role? What does that look like? Because I think we could talk for an hour just about how do you define success throughout your career and throughout your life. I think that definition should definitely change, but I think having a clear definition is like a really important thing to do so that you know what you're trying to work towards. So you know like where to put those hours during the week. I think that's something that takes a while, right? Like I wouldn't expect someone to totally get that off the bat, but I think that's how you can really have an impact is aligning yourself to how your supervisor or your team or your organization is measuring success, and at the end of the year you're able to say, here's how I contributed to us meeting the goals that we needed to meet or that we signed up for.
Yeah, you say right in your, I think, LinkedIn summary that you are results oriented, and that is just absolutely pouring through. So I love that answer because it's very Jenna of you. And I think that's so important, though. Like, that's, people just go and, okay, I show up for my job and I check off the list and I go. That's not going to be enough. You have to understand what is the company or the department or my boss, what are they striving for? What's their goal? What's their KPI? And how can I contribute to that? It really gives you a good direction to go. And so I really appreciate that
Yeah,
answer.
for sure.
Is there anything that you wish someone would have told you when you were just starting out?
When you're first starting out, like certainly listen, build relationships. I do think no matter what industry or job or internship or any social encounter that you have, like building relationships is so important. Remaining curious, asking a lot of questions, because I was actually thinking about that while you were playing back reaction to my answer, and it's like I thought like that can be pretty intimidating. How do you know how an organization's measuring success? And like I think my advice would be just like ask a lot of questions, and feedback is a gift. Ask your peers, ask your mentors, ask your advocates like how am I doing? Where do you see me going next in the organization? I think asking questions like that and just getting a good pulse check. Don't wait till your performance review at the end of the year. Feedback in real time is a gift. And I think the folks who I've seen really, excel in their careers or amplify whatever they're trying to do is like they're open to feedback and they don't just hear the feedback, they implement changes based on that feedback and really drive their journey, because I think ultimately you have to do that for yourself, but you have so many people who help contribute to that journey along the way. And it's really important to have people use this phrase. I wish I could attribute it to whoever first came up with it. I don't know who it was, but like your own personal board of directors, and the board of directors of you, your life, and your career, right? Like, I consider you on as one of my board of directors. Like, if I ever had to reach out to someone and say, what do you think I should do here? Here's what's happening. I'm going through this. Because you want to keep people around you that you value their perspective, because you're going to get a lot of opinions about yourself, and not all of them are valuable and not all of them should matter, right? So I think being really careful also with who you get that feedback from. I think like getting really clear on who those folks are around you can help a ton.
Yeah. I like that you said that feedback is a gift because I think so many people are nervous or fear getting any sort of criticism at work. But what I would encourage is that people really think about that for what it actually is. It's an investment in
Absolutely.
your future, right? That person is taking the time, the effort, the voice to give you this feedback. And if they didn't care, if they didn't think that you had the ability to grow, they would just ignore it, right? They would just forget about it and move on with their day. But if they are taking the time to tell you something, it's because they're investing in you, and you should take it that way instead of, oh, they hate me now. So that's something that I think is very, very important.
Absolutely.
Good. Okay, so let's get back to you started as a marketing coordinator at Aramark. You went and got your MBA within a year, which is like nuts. And then you went back to the company. Tell us a little bit about why you chose to go back to Aramark after your
Yeah,
MBA.
sure. A couple things. I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I knew that I had not learned everything that I could from the opportunity. And I think that's really key, is like knowing when it's time to move on to something else or a new opportunity, is like, have you learned everything that the role has to offer? And so I felt like I still had room to do that. Also, like, I graduated with my MBA in 2008 in the middle of a recession, so not going to pretend like opportunities were coming at me all over the place.
Ugh.
So, I certainly, again, leaned on those networks and relationships that I had. I raised my hand. I said, I'm looking for a new opportunity, and was lucky enough to land where I wanted to be. In that next role, I did it for about 3.5 years before moving to the corporate office. And in those 3.5 years, I still daily lean back on that experience of just being in the operation day to day, learning from like my cross functional partners, working. It was a very like on the ground gritty like marketing and sales role, right? Like you're working with parents and students and getting feedback in real time, and I think like that set the foundation for everything I was able to do after that.
Yeah, that hands-on experience
Yeah,
cannot be
absolutely.
replaced. And so you were at Aramark for what, 15
Yep.
years, I think. And you really moved up the quote unquote corporate ladder there. You got all the way to VP of business to business marketing, a huge company. It's, for anybody that doesn't know, it's a like Fortune 200 or so company. And there's so much opportunity there, but you have to really stand out to make an impact. So, how do you think you were able to make those moves to climb up the ladder?
I think a few things. So the first I'll mention is I don't think anything replaces hard work. And what I mean by that is putting your energy in the places that matter. So again, like we talked about earlier, just like knowing where to spend your time and how to prioritize and really putting that work towards things that are going to move the needle for the organization and things that are going to get noticed. I also think being willing to try new things, like raise your hand to work on projects that maybe you're not an expert in. Ask if you can support different milestones on a project or things that might be a little bit outside your comfort zone. I think just always being willing to try something new and take a risk is always really valued. And then I know I've talked about it already, but just there's nothing that replaces the power of networking and relationships. I think you have to constantly think about how you're selling yourself and continue to just have informational interviews with people, learn about who they are, learn about what they do. And if you start to get that like tickle in the back of your brain, like it might be ready to do something new, like start making that known to people in the organization that you're open to a new opportunity. And I would say that's how I really landed most of mine was like I had expressed the interest to do something new. And then advocates of mine thought of me when they were in a room I wasn't in and there was a new opportunity. So I think like continuing to sell yourself and like network is really important. And then as everything you talk about with emotional intelligence, I think is a huge part of it too. Like people have to want to work with you, right? Like you have to work on your emotional intelligence, your relationships. I think that's a really big piece of how I approach leadership as well as how I approach my work is coming at things with empathy, seeking to understand, thinking about how it's going to affect the team and really meeting people where they are and not expecting me to be the center of the universe, right? Like you got to meet people where they are. Everyone communicates differently. Everyone works differently. And like really getting to understand that about your colleagues and your cross-functional partners, I think is something that has helped me tremendously.
Yeah, and we're going to take a deep dive here on emotional intelligence, but I want to go back to networking. I think people think about that as like going out to networking mixers or DMing people on LinkedIn, but you're even talking about like networking within your organization too, and that's really important. And it might make you uncomfortable to reach out to maybe people who are above you at the organization, but putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions is how you grow. And talking to people is how you're going to get them to, like you said, talk about you or bring up your name when you're not in the room. But those uncomfortable positions, like for myself, for example, I was never trained in sales. It scared the crap out of me to even try and do it. But, I work in a much smaller company and somebody needed to do sales. It was nobody's real job. So I said, all right, I'm going to give it a try. And I think that I grew so much from having those conversations. So putting yourselves in those uncomfortable type scenarios is how you actually
Yeah.
grow. And I think that's part of that is like being self-aware, and that's part of emotional intelligence. So let's talk about that. Like actually, you even have it in your LinkedIn profile. You say proven team player with emotional intelligence and people skills. So what does emotional intelligence mean to you?
Yeah, for sure. So I think emotional intelligence can have a ton of different definitions. I think people can talk about it a lot of different ways, like would encourage people to really figure out what it means for themselves. But I think for me it starts with empathy. Again, I talked about this a minute ago, but as a leader, I really try to meet folks where they are. I think that everybody is in a different part of their career journey. Everyone communicates differently, people work differently, and being able to flex to that and come at it with from a place of empathy, I think is really important. I think also at its core, it's like having the awareness and the reflection as well as the empathy and bringing all of that to your relationships, whether it's inside of work or outside of work. I think that's what it means for me. And I do want to go back to something you said because I think you started the networking piece, right? And like how do you do that? And I think this all is totally related because if you come at it with an authentic approach, like
Mm-hmm.
networking doesn't have to be scary, it doesn't have to feel fake, it doesn't have to be like every single person has a story to tell and brings value to any conversation, any interaction, any room because there's no one else who is the same as you, right? Like you are an authentic and like unique human being, so you have something to add to every conversation, to every room. So I think just having that confidence in yourself, like the CEO of a company could have a conversation with me and learn something. Just like if I have a conversation with the new intern, I'm going to learn something, right? Everybody has like a unique thing to offer. So I would just say like try not to be intimidated by it. It doesn't have to be cold emailing people. It can be, but I think and I would really encourage folks to do it before you need something,
Yeah, that's the
right? So
key.
like, there's nothing worse than that like blind I can't tell you how many times I get blind LinkedIn messages from people who have never acknowledged my existence and then they ask me for something.
Hmm.
So, right,
Yep.
like
Nope.
building those relationships. And I've honestly never encountered a leader, a genuinely good leader, I should probably say that would turn down the opportunity to spend a few minutes with someone who wants to learn from them. So, I think it can be as casual as reaching out either in person or through email and just saying like, "Hey, I really respect your career journey. I think I can learn a lot from you. Would you have 5 or 10 minutes to chat?" And come prepared with a few questions and ask them what maybe is a fun project they're working on. It doesn't have to be like, "What's your advice for me?" Like it can just be a conversation and I think that can go a long way.
Yes, most leaders are going to say yes because people told them
Right.
yes along the
Absolutely.
way, and most want to pay that back. But you gave me just a huge mindset shift. So, something that is talked about a lot with networking is figure out how you can add value. Send them an article or a book or follow up with something or do them a favor. But what you're saying is like, you are bringing value by being yourself and telling your story too. Like that's a big mindset shift. So I really wanted to just point that
Yeah,
out.
absolutely. I've had the opportunity to be in rooms with like leaders of all levels and all organizations, and I can tell you that the ones who are have strong emotional intelligence have really gotten where they are by like leading people what I would consider to be like the right way. They're always curious and they're always open to listening. And like I said, I've seen so many interactions where like folks are learning from each other because they're coming at it from different perspectives. And as a leader, you should be open to those other perspectives and like want to hear what the perceptions and realities are of what's happening throughout the organization. So I think as far as goes networking, especially internally, just yeah, you have value to bring. Absolutely.
It's very helpful to
Yeah,
think that
for
way.
sure.
Okay, so another element of emotional intelligence is resiliency. And for you, a couple years ago, Aramark let go of the entire
Mhm.
department, and you found yourself looking for a job after 15 years at the
Yep.
same company. Obviously, that took some resiliency. So, what did that look like to you at that point?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that point for me initially was definitely like the hardest part of my professional career. It brings up a lot of different feelings. You can feel embarrassed, you can feel shame, you can feel nervous, you can feel angry. And I think like my advice to anyone who goes through it is let yourself feel those feelings, right? It brings up a lot, and I think it's really important to just take a minute to sort of sit with it. But I did come to realize really quickly that some of the strongest, smartest people that I have ever worked with have experienced a layoff, right? Like, it's unfortunately the reality, I think, of the economic environment and the corporate environment that it unfortunately happens to some really, really great, fantastic people. I think it took me just some time to realize like it's not a reflection on your worth. It's not even necessarily a reflection of your work. Sometimes companies just have to make really tough decisions. And I think, again, that mindset shift and just knowing like confidently that I had a lot to offer any organization, um, it really helped me reframe it and put it into perspective. And really, that came back to my network. So many people reached out. They were so helpful, so willing to talk to me. I can't tell you the number of amazing conversations I had throughout that process that didn't necessarily lead to anything professionally, but learned from these people. They gave me advice, like we connected, people from my past I probably wouldn't have reconnected with otherwise. If you try to see the bright side of a tough situation, a lot of really positive things came out of it for me. And I ended up landing with an amazing organization and a role that I really enjoy, and I'm learning so much. So I think at the end of the day, I had to go through it to get where I am. And so for that, I am grateful.
Yeah, it's such a good mindset. And, from my point of view, I could say it's Aramark's loss and Campbell's gain. So tell us how you ended up landing at Campbell's, which is, everybody knows the Campbell's name. How did you
Yeah,
land there?
so again, it was, I mean, really my network. Well, first of all, I'm in the geographical area, right? And I wasn't looking to make a geography move. So I definitely had a lot of connections. There's three or four big companies in the area where I live. And so I'm pretty well connected just through knowing different folks and living here for some time. So I actually had a former colleague send me the job posting. I kind of knew it was potentially meant to be because I had three different people send me the same job, and some had worked there, some worked there currently, and they just said, I read this description, I think it's the perfect job for you, like you need to apply. So I did, and I did have an internal person refer me. I had a couple of like past connections that knew the person that I now work for, and so they reached out. And so I do think that really helped get my initial resume across that finish line and get to the interview stage. And ultimately, seven or so conversations later, and I started in early February of 2024. So I was laid off October of 2023 and landed up February of 2024. And I feel very grateful for that because I know that is not the experience of a lot of folks.
No, that used to be like, oh, 5 or 6 months, that's plenty of time. Now it's like
I
a
know.
year, 2 years, like it can get really difficult in that process to be really stretched out. So that's amazing. And I'm sure that, I want to go back to emotional intelligence. How has it helped you stand out in your newest role?
Yeah, I was asked a lot about my leadership style as well as my working style throughout the interview process. So, something I would encourage folks to do is get really clear on how you talk about it and how you show up with it. I think it can kind of feel like this, like, vague topic. Like, this is like vague thing that no one can really define. And it's also weird to be like, I'm emotionally intelligent, I promise. So, like, having examples of how you've approached situations in the past was really helpful. So, yeah, I think I just got really clear on how it weaves itself into both how I approach my work and how I lead my team, and I was able to talk about that throughout the process.
Yeah, something that I always encourage is people to take the time to actually write down their
Yes.
stories. Think about it, write it down, and that's going to help you think through, like, to your point, this is how I would describe it, this is how I would define it. That is going to help you so much during those conversations or those interviews. To be able to tell the story and have a point at the end of those stories is so much more memorable then, like you said, like, I'm
Yeah,
emotionally intelligent.
exactly. I talked through a lot about, like I said, just my approach to leadership and kind of broke it down into the different areas. And one thing I really talked about was my coaching approach. So, again, feedback is a gift. I was able to articulate my feelings around that and just like how coaching comes into that, right? So, something I really try to do is use the coaching method for feedback, help folks get to their own answer through a series of questions. So, to your point, something that the interview process really helped me with was documenting and getting really clear on my story because I knew I was going to be asked certain questions, right? Like if you're going to go
Yeah.
interview to be a leader somewhere, you know they're going to ask you about your approach to leadership. So, like, get really clear on what that
Yeah.
approach is and be able to back it up with real life examples. And I think that's going to go a really long way.
Yeah, that documentation is going to help you feel much more confident going into those
Yep,
conversations.
for sure.
Okay, so I think you touched on this a little bit with the networking, but you're a people connector. How do you recommend people build authentic connections where it's starting to feel a little forced, or maybe it's everybody's remote, so it's just digital. How can we build those authentic connections?
Yeah, I think again, just like authentically showing up as yourself and don't don't initially reach out asking for something. I guess a really tactical example, because I hate when people do these conversations and they're like, yeah, but what do you want me to go do? So, a really tactical example would be to write down a list of 10 folks that you admire their style. Maybe you admire their work. Maybe you look up to them in certain ways. And they don't have to all be leaders, they can be peers, right? They can be whomever. And once a month, reach out to each, go down your list. And once a month, just reach out and say, hi, I was thinking of you. How are you? Would you be up for virtual coffee? I would love to connect and just keep that going. And if you make a really authentic, because not everyone's going to click, right? Like if you make a
Mm-hmm.
really, I have folks now I've made really authentic connections with. I consider them mentors. I consider them people that I want to continue to grow my relationship with. So now I get coffee or meet with them every month, right? They kind of like make it back up to
Mm-hmm.
the top of my list. So I think just tactically going through and saying, these are people I want to make an effort to make an authentic connection with. You have to be purposeful about it. It's not just going to happen to you. You know, you have to really put effort behind it. Everybody is so busy. If you think about it from this perspective, I had a very strong personal brand at Aramark. Everybody knew who I was, everybody knew my work. And so I didn't have to do as much of that. I started over completely in a new organization. So I not only didn't know where the bathroom was, I had to completely rebuild my own internal brand. And so, like, part of that
Yeah,
was like, I've literally reached out to people I've never met and I've been like, I saw you present. I loved what you had to say. Would love to grab coffee sometime. No one has ever told me no. No one has ever said, you're really weird for doing this. This is uncomfortable. Everyone has always said, that sounds great. Thank you so much for reaching out. I would love to chat. And so, like, I
that's
do that on a consistent basis. And like I said, worst thing that happens is someone tells you no, and then you move on to the next person.
yeah. I mean, I love that you have like an actual list, like an actual strategy that you put behind that. That's how you do it. You don't just randomly be like, oh, I think on a Tuesday I'll reach out to this random person, never follow back up with them. You have to have some sort of organization or strategy, and that really made it super
Yeah, and
simple.
I just don't overthink it. Like,
Hmm.
you can sit next to someone in a meeting and have a quick little chat and be like, hey, would it be cool if I like put time on your calendar? I would love to hear more. That's it. It doesn't have to be like some super methodical, like I go through LinkedIn and map people's careers. Like, it's nothing like that. Like, it can literally just be like, I want to continue this conversation. I love hearing people's stories and I love helping connect people. I think that's what you're referring to. Like, I one of my favorite things to do is be like, I talked to this person and they said this thing, and you know what? I think you would really enjoy meeting this person over here because you two both brought up the same thing that you're working towards. And I love connecting people like that. I've done it many,
Hmm.
many times. It's something that brings me joy. I also get that everything I'm saying comes like natural to me. So if you are someone out there listening to this and this all sounds like your worst nightmare and like squirming in your chair. I get it. I have so many friends that are exactly the same way. And they have to work a little harder at it and they have to make themselves a little uncomfortable, but they've all been very
Mm-hmm.
grateful when they do. And so maybe set a goal that you're just going to get coffee with someone once a quarter. That's a great
Yeah.
place to start.
Yeah. I mean, we just already talked about that, putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions is how
Yeah.
you grow. But spoiler alert, this is what I'm literally doing here, asking people that I admire. And even, you could take it a step further and do this where you're kind of recording these interviews. And when you put it together, it will help you get a job if that's what you're looking for. That's not necessarily why I'm doing it, but that's, I mean, something to consider is maybe once a year that coffee date is recorded and you now have this kind of anthology of successful people, and that will help you as you are looking for your next role. So, something to consider.
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay. So, say somebody feels too junior to contribute in cross functional meetings or meetings where there's senior people there. What's your advice to that person?
I completely hear how it can be intimidating. I think something I'll flip, like I did earlier, is like if you have a seat at the table, it is your responsibility to use your voice in the meeting because you're opening up the opportunity for other people. And so I think that's one way to look at it, right? If you invited into
Mm-hmm.
the room to sit at the table, you were invited there for a reason. Um, Most people aren't invited to meetings and conversations just to take up the seat. So I definitely encourage people, like where appropriate, to contribute, ask questions. I think asking questions can be a great way to get your like feet under you, right? It doesn't have to be like a declarative statement or anything like that. It can just be like, oh, I have a question about what you just mentioned. That sounds really interesting to me. Like, I was thinking about it this way. Am I thinking about that the right way? Like, just being inquisitive and curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, if nothing comes up that's feeling that natural, I would also encourage you to raise your hand to work on part of the project. If you're in a meeting and someone comes up that XYZ analysis needs to be done, say, I would be more than happy to assist with that. If you need anything, let me know. But it kind of gets you on to maybe like a new project or something that then you're more comfortable the next meeting because you've done some of the work.
Yeah. I mean, those are two great examples. I love that. You mentioned that at Aramark you had a brand, everybody knew you, everybody knew your work. I think people, especially when they're maybe just entering into the workforce, they're a little bit worried about tooting their own horns. They want to be a team player. How do you balance that? How do you make sure that people know how good you are and what you are doing and what your value is, but also not, sounding arrogant?
Yeah, this is a tough one, especially for women, because most,
Mm-hmm.
I won't say all, most men have no problem tooting their own horn, talking about all of their accomplishments. So I think it's really a tough one for women. I think you can Google it and see that it's like literally a huge topic that women, like professional women, discuss in multiple
Mm-hmm.
forums.
Yep.
So I think it's a great question. Go back to that definition of success that we talked about at the beginning. So if you are really, really clear on that, then it is your role to make sure your manager knows in your like one-on-ones each week, in your check-ins, like how you are contributing to that success. You don't have to blast it out to everyone in the room. You don't have to be a like, hey, look at me, I did this really cool thing, like in a team meeting. I think it's fine to make sure that your manager knows like how your work is sort of laddering up to what you've both worked together on as what success looks like for your role. Another like a little more general because it's tough to give this advice in the sense of I'm not really sure who all is listening and how they may apply it, but something that I do is I keep a list of wins. So as I
Mm-hmm.
like feel really proud of something I've worked on, check something big off the list, something that really got me excited, like I write it down. And not only does
Yeah.
that help on the hard days when, I'm feeling really down and I'm like, oh, what have I accomplished? Like, I can pull that up and say, actually, yeah, I did some really cool stuff over the last few months. Also, at the end of the year, when I go to do my like end of year review, like I have this great list of things throughout the
Mm-hmm.
year I accomplished and I got really excited about. I would say those are the two things that I would mention for that.
Yeah, I had that advice probably 10 plus years ago. And I started a kudos file on my email. So any email that I get that says, good job or some sort of win is mentioned, I will put it in there. If it's not necessarily something that somebody's saying to me, but I feel good about it, I might write my own self an email and put it in that file so it's all in one place. So that is super helpful to see, in black and white, your list of accomplishments by date. It's
Yeah.
all right there. And when you go to ask for a raise or a promotion, everything is right there for you, and you even have the people saying it about you, so it's not always just you having to say it. So that's really helpful, I
Yeah, the
think.
last thing I'll say, because I think sometimes, like, folks, and this will come with time throughout your career, but something that's really important, and I feel like I've alluded to it a few times, is like understanding who needs to know about your wins and successes. You know,
Yep.
I mentioned, like, you don't need to gloat in a team meeting, right? But, like, knowing who your advocates are, and I define an advocate as someone who is going to advocate for you in rooms that you're not in. So that might be like your boss's boss. That might be your HR manager. I've actually heard great stories of people formally asking leaders and organizations, like, will you be my advocate? Maybe it's a leader on a different team, but you know that they're in a lot of these conversations. And so I think it's great. Mentors are excellent and amazing, and I would not survive without them. But also, like, I do think women really struggle with advocacy. I think it's like a huge issue in the professional environment because advocates are absolutely essential. And so I think like identifying who those advocates are and making sure they can articulate some of your wins. That that's the golden ticket in my opinion.
Yeah, I think having those advocates, and also not being afraid to advocate for
Yes.
yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So like you said, men do it all the time, so you got to figure out what you're comfortable with and then push yourself even a little bit past that.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I was thinking about like other advocates, but like you are your own number one advocate and you have to be able to advocate for yourself. And I think it's even advocating yourself to ask someone to advocate on your behalf, you know? So the more
Yeah,
the more you
exactly.
get comfortable selling yourself, um, the better off you'll be, just generally speaking, I think.
Yeah. All right. So the world is changing. We've got AI. There's all kinds of things happening. What skills do you think Gen Z women should prioritize now to make sure that they can thrive in their future careers?
Yeah, it's a tough one not knowing. I would love to get more like specific into this with someone, but I think generally speaking, I do think listening, and I know I've used the word curious a few times. I do think there's a lot of like really cool research about how remaining curious actually makes organizations better. And so I think like that listening and curiosity and asking questions, I think relationship building, we've talked about that a ton today, so I won't repeat it all, but just like creating relationships with folks, getting to know them, letting them get to know you. And, I think as I sit in a marketing seat, like one of the critical things that I have to do is be able to work with cross functional partners, right? That's one of the things I love about my job and I loved about my last job is like I literally worked with everyone across the organization. So I'm working with our culinary team, our product development team, our finance team, our procurement team. There's literally no team internally that I don't work with. And so like how can you be that person that gets it? That's always my goal is I want that cross-functional partner to say, "You know what? Jenna might be in marketing, but she gets it. She gets what I need to do my job. She gets my pain. She understands where I'm coming from. And because of that, it's great to work with her because we can collaborate and get to a solution that works best for both of us." I think being able to master that someone feels that way about you is like a really good skill to focus on. So when you're just starting out, like get to know your cross-functional partners, not just people on your team. Learn about their jobs, what keeps them up at night. I kind of hate that because work shouldn't keep anyone up at night, but you know what I mean? What's on their plate, what's great about their job, what's maybe tough, and how can you help make it better? I think is a way to make yourself an asset to the team.
One of the things I repeat often is curiosity beats credentials, especially in this space right now
Absolutely.
where we don't really know what's coming. So the stuff that you have done is important, but the stuff that you can do in the future, are willing to learn and willing to grow, that is so important when you're looking for a job or a role or a promotion. They want to hear that almost more in this case than what your credentials were before. So I love that we've kind of focused on curiosity because it's just so important.
100%. I say that all the time. I'm like, I don't really, I mean, resume and experience is important. It's your proven track record of, but it's all about the past. I want to know about the future. Like, what are you going to bring to the organization? What is your learning agility like? Can I put you in a new situation and know you're going to figure it out? And I'm here to help you. But that type of attitude and that type of like curiosity is absolutely what I look for. And I think what most organizations are looking for these days. To your point, we can't predict what the problem of tomorrow is going to be. So I can't hire someone who knows how to fix the problem of tomorrow because I don't know what the problem is. So I have to hire people that I know have the learning agility and the perseverance and the curiosity to go fix it.
Yeah, I hope that people are listening till the end because that is what's going to get you a job.
Yeah.
All right, Jenna, last question for you. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice as a new graduate entering the workforce, what would it be?
I wish I had more confidence and less imposter syndrome when I first started. Certainly, confidence and building your confidence is going to take time, but I tried to like outwork everyone. Like, I was like, if I work the most hours, if I have the most unhealthy boundaries, if I like do all the things, like, I'll be good. No one can question my worth. No one can question my value because I'm outworking everybody. And my advice to my younger self would be like, you don't need to do that. You bring a ton to the table. You have so much value and so much worth just with who you are and how you show up. So I hope that someone out there can resonate with that and remember that you are a unique and wonderful individual with your own story, and you're going to bring value as long as you show up authentically and remain curious.
I love that. Well, Jenna, this has been amazingly helpful. I hope
Good.
people are going to get so much value out of this. If somebody wanted to reach out and learn more about you, what's the best way?
Yeah, absolutely. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm always there, always checking messages. If you hear anything that you have more questions about that you want to talk through or any advice I can give, I'm always around. I'm always up for it. So, yeah, definitely my LinkedIn page.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. It was lovely.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.